I am Lisa.
And I'm Eric. Do you want to improve your English easily? If so, you're in the right place.
Okay, today we'll listen to a podcast about 5 tips for improving English reading skills.
Let's listen to it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. I'm Emma.
And I'm Mark. It's great to be here with you all again.
Today, we're going to talk about something very important, how to improve your English reading skills.
Improving reading skills can initially feel challenging, but with practice and the right methods, everybody gets the hang of them and feels more confident.
Yes, we'll share 5 different methods. So, let's have a look at them first.
The first one, paragraph paraphrase, read a part, then say it in your own words.
Then, character plot summaries. Write short notes about the characters or events.
Vocabulary, highlight. Mark new words and write their meanings.
Multiple reading modes. Read in your language first, then in English.
The last one, discussion. Talk about the text with yourself or a friend. So, let's get started and see how we can make reading in English easier and more enjoyable. Are you ready, Emma?
Absolutely, Mark. Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's start with our first method. It's called paragraph paraphrase.
Yes, this one is really helpful. So, what do?
Well, when you read a text, you break down the text into smaller, more understandable parts. It means you stop after each paragraph or short section. Then, you try to say what you just read in your own words.
You try to explain it using different words and simple sentences.
It's like summarizing, but you're not just repeating the same words. You're using your own words.
This helps you understand the text better. It makes you think about what you're reading.
I tried paraphrasing news articles every morning. It really helped me understand the news better and learn new words.
It's a great way to practice and improve your understanding. All right, let's move on to our second method, character plot summaries.
Yes, this one is very useful for stories and novels. So how does it work?
Well, when you read a story, you write short summaries about the characters or the events.
Like, after you finish a chapter, you write down who did what and why.
Exactly. You can make notes about the characters and what they are like.
This helps you remember the story's details and the characters' relationships.
I like to use this method for mystery books. I write down all the clues and try to guess who the bad guy is.
I like to use it for fantasy books. I write down the names of the characters and their special powers.
It's a great way to keep track of the story and learn new words related to the plot.
Okay, Emma, are you ready for our third method? It's called vocabulary highlight.
Yes, I am. This one is all about new words. So, how do we do it?
Well, when you read, you highlight or mark the new or interesting words.
Yes, you can use a highlighter or mark them on your e-reader.
And then you write down those words in a notebook. You can also write their definitions or example sentences.
This helps you remember the new words and use them later.
I keep a small notebook next to me when I read. It's very helpful.
It's a great way to build your vocabulary and make it active.
And you can review those words later to make sure you remember them.
Okay, Mark, let's talk about our fourth method, multiple reading modes.
Yes, this one is very interesting. So what do we do?
Well, you read the same text in different ways.
First, you can read a short summary in your own language. This helps you understand the main idea.
Then, you read the full text in English. This helps you focus on the details.
And then, you can read it out loud or read it silently again.
It's like reading the text in layers. It helps you understand it better.
At first, long English texts can be scary, but this method makes it easier.
Yes, it helps you feel more comfortable with reading in English.
All right, Emma, let's move on to our fifth and final method, discussion based on the text.
Yes, this is a great way to practice speaking and thinking. So, how does it work?
Well, after you read something, you talk about it. You can talk to yourself or with a friend.
You can ask questions like, what did you think about the main idea? Or, what would you change in the story?
Exactly. You can talk about the characters, the author's ideas, or anything that you find interesting.
It helps you think about the text in English and share your opinions.
It's like having a conversation about what you read. I like to ask myself, if I were the author, I would not write it in that way.
That's a great way to practice. It helps you organize your thoughts and express them in English. Now, let's talk about our own experiences, Mark. How did you choose reading materials when you were learning English?
Well, I started with simple books and short stories. I tried to choose topics that I was interested in.
Me too. I remember it was hard to read long or classic books at first.
Yes, but I kept practicing. I tried all the methods we talked about today.
And it really helped. I started to feel more confident with reading in English.
It's important not to be afraid of making mistakes, and it's important to keep practicing regularly. Practice is the key.
Okay, everyone, let's quickly remember the 5 methods we talked about today. We had paragraph paraphrase, character plot summaries, vocabulary highlight, multiple reading modes, and discussion.
We hope you try these methods and have fun improving your English reading skills.
We hope you found it helpful. Which method will you try first?
Maybe start with paragraph paraphrase. It's a great way to understand the text better.
Yes, or vocabulary highlight. It's a great way to learn new words.
We'll be back with more tips next time.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.
It was a very interesting podcast, Lisa.
I agree, Eric. I especially liked the paragraph paraphrase method. Breaking down a text into smaller sections makes it so much easier to understand.
Right. And you can do it with any book or article. Have you tried any of the methods yet?
I have. I wrote a quick summary of a story I read, and it really helped me remember the details.
That's awesome, Lisa. It just shows how effective these tips can be.
Definitely. All right, let's start our podcast. What are the words today, Eric?
The first word today is initially. Then we will continue with challenging and out loud. Then break down something. And the final one is get the hang of something.
Let's start with the first word.
The first word is initially.
Initially.
This is an adverb. It means at the beginning or at first. We use it to talk about what happens at the start of something.
For example, initially, I found learning English difficult, but now I enjoy it. This means it was hard in the beginning, but later it got easier.
Here's another example. The movie was initially boring, but it became exciting later. This means the movie was boring at first, but it changed and got better.
I have one, too. They initially planned to travel by car, but they decided to take the train instead. This means their first plan was to use the car, but they changed it.
Now, let's look at how to use initially in sentences. Initially is usually at the beginning of a sentence or clause, but you can also place it after the subject. For example, at the beginning, initially she didn't like coffee. After the subject, she initially didn't like coffee. Also, remember that initially is formal, so it's often used in writing or more serious conversations.
So that's initially. It's a useful word when talking about changes or the beginning of something. I think now our listeners understand the word initially better. Let's move on to our next word.
The next word is challenging.
Challenging.
Challenging is an adjective. It means something that is difficult but interesting or rewarding to do. It's often used when something requires effort and hard work to succeed.
Yes, exactly. For example, learning a new language can be challenging. This means it's not easy, but it's worth the effort.
Let me give you another example. The hike up the mountain was challenging, but the view at the top was amazing. This means the hike was hard, but the result made it worthwhile.
It makes sense. Is challenging formal or informal, Eric?
It's neutral, so you can use it in almost any situation. For example, in a casual setting, that hike was so challenging. In a formal setting, this role will be challenging, but I'm excited to take it on.
That's great. It's such a flexible word. So, shall we move on to the next word?
Let's do that. The next word is out loud.
Out loud.
Out loud means spoken so others can hear it, or not silently. For example, she read the story out loud to the class.
That makes sense. It's about using your voice to say something clearly and audibly.
Exactly. Let's look at some more examples. He laughed out loud at the funny joke. If you have an idea, say it out loud.
These examples are really clear. Here's another one. I accidentally said what I was thinking out loud.
That's a good one.
Eric, I've heard some people say aloud instead of out loud. Are they the same?
Great question. Yes, they mean the same thing, but out loud is more common in everyday conversations. You might find aloud in books or formal writing.
How do we use out loud in a sentence?
It usually comes after the verb. For example, he read the poem out loud, or he laughed out loud.
So, it's a phrase that works everywhere. That's really useful. All right, that's all for out loud. Let's move on to the next word.
The next word is breakdown.
Break down.
To break down is phrasal verb, and it has a few common meanings. So, the first meaning is to analyze or explain something in detail. For example, imagine you have a long document and you divide it into smaller sections to explain it more easily. You're breaking it down.
Ah, I see. So, if I have a recipe with many steps, I can say, let me break it down for you. First, chop the vegetables, then boil the water.
Exactly. This is a great way to help someone understand something complicated. The teacher might say, let's break down this equation step by step.
All right. What's the next meaning, Eric?
The second meaning is to stop working, especially for machines or vehicles. For example, my car broke down on the way to work.
I've heard this phrase before, like, the washing machine broke down, so I need to call a repair person.
Yes, exactly. It's common to use this when talking about machines.
And what's the third meaning?
The third meaning is to become very upset or emotional. For example, she broke down and cried when she heard the bad news.
Oh, that's a bit sad, but I can see how this phrase shows strong emotions.
Yes, it's often used in serious situations, like he broke down during the speech because it reminded him of his childhood.
Okay, well, we've explained breakdown pretty well. Let's move on to the last word. What is the last word?
The last word is get the hang of something.
Get the hang of something.
The phrase get the hang of something means to learn how to do something, especially if it is hard at first. It's often used when you practice something and finally understand it.
So it's like saying you're figuring out how something works or how to do it better over time.
Exactly. For example, I didn't know how to use the new app at first, but now I'm getting the hang of it.
How about this one? Learning to cook can be tricky, but you'll get the hang of it after a few tries.
Perfect example, Lisa.
Let's talk about grammar. How do we use get the hang of something in a sentence, Eric?
Good question. It's an informal phrase, and it's often used with verbs like get or have. For example, with get, I'm starting to get the hang of this video game. With have, I already have the hang of using this software.
Right. And don't forget the word something. It can be replaced with anything specific, like driving or swimming.
Yes. For example, I'm getting the hang of driving a car, or she's got the hang of swimming now. And remember, it's definitely informal. You'd use it in casual conversations with friends or colleagues, but probably not in formal writing or speeches.
So instead of saying, I got the hang of it, in a formal situation, you might say, I've learned how to do it.
Exactly. That sounds more professional.
Okay, well, that's it for today's episode of Simply Explained English. We hope you found the words helpful and the explanations easy to understand.
Thanks for listening. Keep studying your English.
And stay tuned. Bye for now. I am Lisa.
And I'm Eric. Do you want to improve your English easily? If so, you're in the right place.
Okay, today we'll listen to a podcast about how to understand fast English.
Let's listen to it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Emma. Today, we're talking about something that many English learners find tricky: understanding fast speech.
Exactly, Emma. Have you ever felt like people are speaking English at 100 miles an hour? It can be really frustrating.
Oh, definitely. You know some of the words, but it all just blends together. It feels impossible to understand sometimes.
We totally get it. But the good news is, there are some practical things you can do to make it easier. It takes practice, but it's definitely achievable.
That's right. We will share 4 methods that can help you understand fast English. Ready to dive in, Mark?
Absolutely. Let's start with our first method. Diversify your listening practice.
So, what do we mean by diversifying your listening practice? Well, it's about listening to different kinds of English. Don't just stick to one type of audio.
Exactly. Think about it. If you only listen to very formal, scripted English, like in some textbooks, you won't be prepared for how people actually talk in everyday life.
Yes, start with things you find easy and interesting. Maybe listen to podcasts or videos about your hobbies. If you love cooking, find some simple cooking shows in English. The more familiar you are with a topic, the easier it will be to understand, even if it's a bit fast.
Good point, Emma. And then, try listening to unscripted conversations, things like interviews or casual chats between friends. This is closer to how people speak naturally.
And don't forget about different accents. English isn't just spoken in one way. Try listening to speakers from different countries, the UK, Australia, Canada, and even different regions within the same country. It can be a challenge at first, but it really helps your ear get used to different sounds.
Definitely. The more variety you have in your listening, the better you'll become at understanding different speaking styles and speeds.
Okay, let's move on to our second method. Develop your listening prediction skills.
This is a really useful technique. It's about using context to guess what someone is going to say next.
Think of it like this. When you're having a conversation, you often have an idea of what the other person might say. You use clues from the situation and what they've already said.
Exactly. For example, if someone says, I'm going to the, you can probably guess they're going to say a place like store or park.
Right. When you're listening to English, try to do the same thing. Pay attention to the topic and the situation. What words or phrases might come next?
A simple activity you can do is to pause videos or podcasts after someone starts speaking. Try to guess what they're going to say next before you unpause.
That's a great idea. Even if you're wrong, it helps you focus and think about the language. The more you practice predicting, the better you'll become at anticipating what people will say, even when they're speaking quickly.
Our third method is all about understanding linking and reductions.
Ah, yes. This is a big one for understanding fast speech. Linking and reductions are how native speakers often connect words and shorten sounds when they talk quickly.
So, linking is when the sound at the end of one word connects to the sound at the beginning of the next word. For example, instead of saying an apple with a pause, it sounds more like an apple.
Exactly. Another common example is when a word ends in a consonant sound. and the next word starts with a vowel sound. Like look at often sounds like look at.
And reductions are when sounds are shortened or even disappear. For example, going to often becomes gonna, and want to becomes wanna.
Understanding these common linking and reduction patterns can make a huge difference. When you know what to listen for, fast speech becomes much easier to follow.
You can find lots of examples of linking and reductions online. Listen carefully to how native speakers pronounce these phrases. Practice saying them yourself, too.
Our final method is to build a mental cultural bank.
This might sound a bit strange, but understanding the culture behind the language can really help you understand fast speech.
Think about it. Language isn't just about words. It's also about the culture and the way people think and interact. This includes things like idioms, humor, and common cultural references.
Exactly. If someone uses an idiom you've never heard before, like break a leg, you might be confused. But if you know it's a way of wishing someone good luck, it makes sense.
And humor can be tricky too. Sometimes jokes rely on cultural knowledge. If you don't understand the reference, you might not get the joke.
So, how do you build this mental cultural bank? Well, watch movies and TV shows, read books and articles, and try to learn about the culture of the English-speaking countries you're interested in.
Pay attention to common phrases and expressions. If you hear something you don't understand, look it up. The more you learn about the culture, the better you'll understand the language, even when it's spoken quickly.
So, let's quickly recap the 4 methods we've discussed today.
First, diversify your listening practice by listening to different types of English content and different accents.
Second, develop your listening prediction skills by using context clues to guess what people will say.
Third, learn about linking and reductions, which are common ways native speakers connect and shorten words.
And fourth, build a mental cultural bank by learning about idioms, humor, and cultural references.
Remember, understanding fast speech takes time and practice. Don't get discouraged if you don't understand everything right away.
Keep practicing these methods regularly, and you'll definitely see improvement. Even small steps forward are progress.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for joining us on English Explorers.
Bye, everyone.
Lisa, what do you think about the podcast?
It was so helpful. I really liked how they explained linking and reductions.
Same here. And their tip about diversifying listening practice made a lot of sense. Our followers should try more accents.
Absolutely. I also loved the idea of learning cultural references.
Agreed. I hope our followers found the podcast and the tips useful.
I hope so, Eric. Okay, let's start our podcast. What are the words today, Eric?
The first word today is familiar. Then we will continue with clue and to diversify. Then look up something. And the final one is break a leg.
Let's start with the first word.
The first word is familiar.
Familiar.
Familiar is an adjective, and it means that you know something well, or it feels like you've seen it or experienced it before. Here's an example sentence. This song sounds familiar, but I can't remember the name. This means the person thinks they've heard the song before, but they don't remember where.
Oh, I see. If you visit a place you've been to many times, you can say, "This place feels familiar to me."
Perfect example, Lisa. It's like when something isn't new or strange to you.
Let me give another example. He is familiar with the new computer program.
Yes, Lisa, it means he knows how to use it.
But we can also use familiar to describe people, right?
Absolutely. If you meet someone and think, I know this person from somewhere, you might say, you look familiar. Now, let's talk about grammar. Familiar is often followed by with or to. For example, I'm familiar with this book. Or this book is familiar to me. Did you notice the difference the usage with and to, Lisa?
Yes, I did. For example, Are you familiar with this area? Or is this area familiar to you?
Perfect, Lisa. Just a small tip. The opposite of familiar is unfamiliar. For example, this road is unfamiliar to me, and it is a very common word in both formal and informal English.
Unfamiliar. Okay, got it. Well, that's all for the word familiar. Let's move on to the next word.
The next word is clue.
Clue.
Clue is a noun, and it means a piece of information that helps you solve a problem, mystery, or question.
Yes. For example, in detective stories, the detective finds clues to solve a crime.
Exactly. Here's an example sentence. The map gave them a clue about where the treasure was hidden. This means the map showed some information to help them find the treasure.
Here's another one. I had no clue what he was talking about. This means I didn't understand at all, like I didn't have any idea.
That's a great example. A common phrase is have a clue or give a clue. You can also say no clue when you don't know something. I have no clue is an informal way of saying I don't know. If someone asks, where's the nearest bus stop? And you don't know, you can say, I have no clue.
Or, can you give me a clue? Means you're asking for a hint or some help.
Yes, Lisa. It's a super useful word in daily conversations and fun to use in games or puzzles.
Okay, well, I think now our followers understand the word clue better. Now let's move on to our next phrase.
The next word is to diversify.
Diversify.
Diversify is a verb, and it means to make something more varied or include more different kinds of things. Think of it like adding variety to something.
Oh, so it's like when I eat different types of fruit for breakfast instead of just apples?
Exactly. You're diversifying your breakfast. For example, you could also say, I want to diversify my diet by eating more vegetables and grains.
Got it. It's about including more options or choices. What about other situations where we use this word?
People often use diversify in business. For example, the company decided to diversify by selling clothes as well as shoes.
Ah, so instead of just selling shoes, a company might start selling clothes too.
That's a perfect example. And another common area is investments. Financial advisors often say, you should diversify your investments. That means putting your money into different things, like stocks, real estate, and savings to reduce risk.
Oh, so it's like not putting all your eggs in one basket?
Exactly, Lisa. That's a great expression to remember with this word.
That's very useful. And diversify is a formal word, right?
Mostly, yes. You'll see it more in business, finance, or formal writing. But you can still use it in everyday conversations when you want to sound a bit professional or specific.
Okay, well, I think now our followers understand the word diversify better. Now, let's move on to our next word.
The next word is look up something.
Look up something.
Look up something is a phrasal verb. It means to search for information about something, usually in a book, on the internet, or in a dictionary.
Oh, so it's like when I don't know the meaning of a word, I can look it up in the dictionary?
Exactly. For example, I didn't know what photosynthesis meant, so I looked it up online.
Got it. It's about finding answers or information.
That's right. You can also use it for other things, like looking up a phone number, an address, or even directions.
Like, I need to look up the train schedule before we leave.
Perfect example, Lisa. Now, a quick grammar tip. Look up is separable, so you can say look something up or look it up. For example, I'll look it up for you is correct, but you can't say I looked up it.
Okay, now it's time to practice. Think about something you've looked up recently. Maybe a recipe or some information for school or work.
Okay. Yesterday, I looked up how to bake a chocolate cake.
Or, I looked up the address of a new restaurant I want to try.
Great example, Lisa.
Eric, do you think look up is formal or informal?
It's more casual, Lisa. You'd use it in conversations or emails with friends. In a formal setting, you might say research instead, like, I need to research this topic.
Good point. But for everyday use, look up works perfectly. Okay, well, we've reached today's last word. What is the last word, Eric?
The last word is break a leg.
Break a leg.
Break a leg is an idiom, and it's a way to wish someone good luck, especially before they perform on stage or do something important. It's like saying, I hope everything goes really well for you.
That's interesting. So if my friend is about to act in a play, I could say, break a leg.
Perfect example. It's very common in theater, but people also use it in other situations, like before a big presentation, an exam, or even a sports match.
Is it informal, Eric?
Yes, Lisa. It's an informal phrase, so you can use it in casual conversations. For example, you have a big test tomorrow? Break a leg. It's not something you'd say in very serious or formal situations.
And it's usually said on its own, right? Like, you wouldn't say, I hope you break a leg.
That's right, Lisa. It's usually a short, cheerful phrase. Just say, break a leg. You can say it to anyone, anytime they're about to do something important.
Now it's time to practice. My friend is singing in a concert tonight, so I told her, break a leg. Or, before my sister's job interview, I said, break a leg, to wish her good luck.
Great examples, Lisa.
Okay, well, that's it for today's episode of Simply Explained English. We hope you found the words helpful and the explanations easy to understand.
Thanks for listening. Keep studying your English.
And stay tuned. Bye for now.